Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of Coding for Absolute Beginners. This episode will cover types and variables. So, as we talked about in the previous video, we were printing the string hello world. You can run it again to see that it prints the right thing. But there are other things print can take in as well, such as the number 5. Here, this 5 is of type integer or an int for short. So, this is no longer a string. But if we run it, we indeed see 5 printed to the screen. What happens here is that when print receives an integer, it prints that integer to the screen. In reality, what happens underneath the hood is that the integer is automatically converted to a string containing a 5. So this string containing 5. And like before, print knows how to handle a string, namely, it shows the contents of the string to the screen, in this case, the 5. So with this, we've already covered 2 types. So going back, we had print hello world, and now print 5. We covered both strings and ints. There are other types like floats and doubles, which are just numbers with decimals at certain precisions. And then there are booleans, which are either the word true or false. And then there's so much more. I'll let you learn how to create and use other types on your own. There is good documentation on the internet, and in general, a good way to learn is to just start coding, where you'll naturally have to use these other types. In future videos, I will end up using a lot of these other types as well, so waiting for those is fine. With that, let's start talking about variables. So up till now, we have only been using what we call values. Here, print takes in the value hello world, which is a string value. Here, print takes in the value 5, which is an integer value. Variables are just containers that store, or better yet, refer to values. For example, let's write x equals 5. Here, x is a variable, and it refers to the value integer 5. From this, another way to think of variables is that variables can act as a name for values. Here, x is the name, and it contains the value 5. In Python, the only rule for variable names is that they cannot contain special character, such as spaces. The way to look at variables is the name of the variable, in this case x, and the value of the variable, in this case 5. We can now do x equals 6. This is an assignment statement where we're saying set the name or set the value of the variable with name x to be 6. So after this line, the variable with name x will contain or point to or refer to the value 6. We can have multiple different variables and assign variables to variables as well. For example, we all have x equals 5 and x equals 6, but we can do y equals 7. Now, y is a variable that is equal to 7, the value 7. We can also set variables to variables, so we can do z equals y. So here, the name of the variable is z, but what is the value of z? Well, this statement here is saying set the value of a variable named z to be the value of a variable named y. What is the value of variable named y? It is 7 here. That is the last thing that the value of y has been set to. So in this case, the value of z is set to 7. Anything in Python and other languages can take in variables instead of actual information. For example, instead of saying print 5, here we could say print x. And then if you run it, we'll see x printed as 5 here. What's happening here is print is printing the value of the variable x. What is the value of variable x at this line? Well, it was set to 5 last. So it is printing the value of x, or printing 5. And as before, like I said, 5 is converted to a string, and print knows how to handle a string. So with this, let's go and double check that z is actually what we think it is. In this case, we thought that z was 7. So let's go print z. And look, we do indeed see 7 printed for z. One question to ask is, what happens to z if the value of y is changed? For example, if we do y equals 8, and then we do print z again. Will z now equal 8, or will z still stay at 7? So let's run to find out. And we see that z stayed at 7. So what's happening here is that here, z is referring to the value of y. And the value of y at this line is 7. It's not referring to the variable y, but the value of y. So it does not matter what happens to y after this line, since g is just referring to the value of y at this line. Okay, with that, let's clear our screen and let's look at operators to see some basic things we can do with values and variables in Python and other languages. Operators are just built-in syntax that allows you to do common things such as adding, subtracting, multiplying, and so on. So let's start by just printing 1 plus 2. Here, the plus sign is the operator, and 1 and 2 are values that are integers. Python knows that running this operator plus on two integers is equivalent to just summing them up. So print should print the sum of 1 and 2, which in this case should be 3. And let's see if we see that. Great, we saw 3. It's also important to note that operators don't just work on values, but they can work on variables or a combination of both. So for example, we can say x is equal to 1 plus 2. And then if you print x, we should again see another 3, which we can also do something like x equals x plus 1. And then let's print x again. But before we run it, let's try to figure out what will happen here. So we're setting the value of x to be equal to the value of x plus 1. Well, what is the value of x here? Well, x was 1 plus 2, so the value of x here was 3, which is what was printed here. So we're setting the value of x here to be equal to 3 plus 1, so this should be 4. So when we print it, x should print out 4. And let's see if that happens. And it does. The specific case of adding 1 to a variable is known commonly as incrementing in coding and computer science. And there is a short form of doing this in Python, which is x plus equals 1. There are other operators as well, like multiplication, which you use this character, division, which you use slash, and subtraction, and others more. I will let you figure these out by yourselves. One thing I want to go in more detail about is to make the point that variables have data types. So for example, in this x equals 5, the value of x is 5, which is an integer. So x's type is an integer. However, you can set variables to be any type. For example, I can do s equals hello world, exclamation point. And then if I print s, we should see what we saw before, which is hello world. In this case, s's type is a string. One thing you can do in Python, which not all other languages support, is resetting a variable to different data type. Here, s is of a data type string because the value of s is of type string. For some languages, the data type of a variable cannot change once it's created. So for some languages, you cannot do something like s is equal to 5 because now s is changing from a type of a string to an int. However, you can do s is equal to another string because s is changing from a string to back to a string. It's just the value of the string is changing. However, there's no such thing in Python. In Python, you can do something like s is equal to 5, s is equal to false, and all that is okay. Still, in general, it is important to pay attention to the types of your variable. It is very easy to mess up types and do something that you were not intending to do. So for example, let me clear my screen and say x is equal to 1, and then a is equal to x plus 1. If we print a, we should see that a is equal to the value of x plus 1, and the value of x is 1, so a should equal 2. So let's see that that does indeed happen. A is equal to 2. Again, this works because x is of type int, x is 1, and adding an int together is the same as summing the two numbers, so 1 plus 1, which is 2. However, let's make x equal to the string 1. Here, x is equal to the string 1 because anything in quotes is by default a string. So x, the value of x is the string 1. Now, what happens if we're adding x plus 1, where this 1 is an int, but this 1 is a string? we get an error. I won't go into the details of this error, but the important thing here is to see why looking at type information is very important. In this case, an error was thrown, so we know something bad is happening. But in other cases, the code might silently work, just not work in a way that you're expecting. I'll go into more detail in the next episode about functions, but an easy way to see the type of a variable or a value is by using the type function. So let's first start by clearing our screen and then doing print type 5 and then running it. Here, we see the type of 5 is an int. You can ignore this for now. I'll go into later about what that means. Similarly, let's try testing this with variables. So let's do x is equal to 6, and then y is equal to, this is a string. And then let's print type of x and print type of y. What we should see is this should print int, and then this should print string. But let's test it first. All right, we see that it does indeed print int, and it does indeed print string. And then finally, let's change the type of one of these variables. So let's set y to be an int now. Now, if we print type of y, y should now be an int here, but it should still be a string here, because at this point in time, y is a string. So we do see that y is a string, and now it's an int. So let's end this video with a simple exercise. Let's clear our screen and have two variables. S1 is equal to first string, and then S2 is equal to second string. And let's figure out how to swap these variables. So the goal we have is we want S2 to refer to the value of S1 and S1 to refer to the value of S2. Namely, we want the value of S1 to be second string and the value of S2 to be first string. What you might need to do is just have S1 is equal to S2, and then S2 is equal to S1. Let's go see if this works by printing the contents of S1, and then printing the contents of S2. Let's clear the terminal and then run. We see that S1 was indeed swapped and contains second string, but S2 still contains second string. What's happening here is first, S1 is equal to S2, which means that the value of S1 is being set to the value of S2, which is second string. And then here, we are saying the value of S2 should be set to the value of S1. Well, what's the value of S1 here? We just said it, it's second string. So the value of S2 is being set to second string again. The problem here is that we're losing the value of S1 when we're doing this assignment. When we do S1 equals S2, we're setting the value of S1 to be second string, so that original value of first string is lost forever, and we can't access it here. An easy way to solve this is to save that value of S1 in a temporary variable, which I'll call temp. So temp is equal to the value of S1. Now we're setting the value of S1 to be second string, but we want S2 to be the original value of S1, which we stored in temp, so we can just say S2 is equal to temp. Now, if we run our code, we should see we get the strings in reverse order, or we're getting what we want. To reiterate the point earlier in the video, it's important to note that when we do change S1 here, temp does not change. Again, this is because here, the value of temp is being set to the value of S1 at this point in time. It is not being set to S1 itself. So no matter what happens to S1 after, the value of temp is just a value. In this case, is first string. Great. So that was a short introduction to variables. There is much more to learn here, but this should give you enough info to get started. And as always, I recommend you try to do things yourselves. The next video, I'll cover functions, so please look out for that. And as always, please leave a comment with any questions or suggestions you may have. Thank you.